All right, welcome back everybody to another episode of IGN House Call. Today we have a very special guest. We have Kris Antoni, founder of Toge Productions.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. I am Amran, and then of course the guy who did the intro just now is Dale. So just to start things off, for those at home who aren't familiar with you or Toge, could you introduce yourself and then probably tell us a bit about how you got your start in gaming?
Okay. Yeah, so my name is Kris Antoni, and I'm basically the founder and probably final boss at Toge Productions, which is like a very small indie game development and also publishing studio based in just outside of Jakarta in Indonesia. And we've been, basically the company started back in 2000 and, well, officially it's 2010, but before that, like, the company started when I was like fresh from, just graduated from university, and I was working on a games company in Indonesia. And back then, like, one of my uni friends asked me like, hey, do you want to join me and to make a flash game, because there's this flash game competition online, and the prize money was like about like $1,000. It was pretty good at back in like 2009, stuff like that. So I thought like, oh, okay, we could do this after work, on our free time. But then because of time differences, we kind of missed the deadline for submitting the game, so we didn't win. But from throughout that experience, we kind of like we learned about flash game development, and we kind of like found out about, oh, there's a flash game market, and you can make a living by making flash games. So like right after that, like only like within like maybe a month or two, both of us quit our day jobs and started making flash games in our bedroom. And that was like in 2009. And after making maybe like one or three, maybe 2 or 3 games, we decided to like make it official as a company. And so we registered the company in 2010. And like we've been kind of like growing since then. And we've also seen a lot of like changes, or like the industry, the game industry evolving in Southeast Asia, and also like especially in Indonesia. And what started as like a 2-man team kind of like hobby kind of like thing, working from your bedroom, kind of like steadily grew, and around 2014, like we kind of like expanded to mobile games and also to PC games, because like Steve Jobs told like, oh, we're not gonna support Flash on iOS and stuff like that. So there, the news about Flash is dying kind of like kind of blew up. So to anticipate that, basically we also have to adapt, and that's why we started experimenting with mobile games, PC games, and eventually console games as well. And I think we did that kind of like at the right moment, and we managed to transition kind of like sort of like seamlessly into those different platforms. And now we have not only in-house game development, but we also do game publishing, mostly to help Southeast Asian indie game developers to get funding, to get game design consultation, and basically to bring their games to the global market. And our vision is that we want the world to see like Indonesia and Southeast Asia not only as market, but also like we want to be known as like prolific game developers. Like we want to be known as game producers, and we want to bring like games from our culture and our our region to the global market, because we feel like, you know, there's a lot of things that the world haven't seen before. We kind of like, probably we don't realize that, but it's really, I think we have a wealth of, you know, culture, you know, stories and stuff like that that we could, you know, export globally. So that's what we want to do right now.
Nice, that's so cool. Happy 10 years to Toge then.
Yeah, thank you.
10 years.
Yeah, speaking of that, yeah, Toge, how did you guys come up with that name? And what's the philosophy behind naming your company after the bean sprout?
Yeah,
You know?
so funny story.
Yeah.
That name was actually a joke. We weren't really that, you know, like thinking about it seriously.
Mhm.
And it kind of started back when I was in uni. So we have like, I did like a double degree exchange student program with an Australian university. So like my co-founder and I, and then another like a couple other Indonesian students, we studied there for a year, and then for our final year project, we need to make some, you know, like some 3D software based on, you know, game engines, stuff like that. And then we're told like you have to have like a proper team name, right? Like you have to treat your team like you're doing your own company, something like that. So because we thought like, oh, all of us are Indonesians and the others, you know, groups are like Australians, we thought like, oh, we need to be unique and we need to, you know, like be basically to represent Indonesia. And then we thought like, what kind of name, you know, sounds Indonesian? And then, you know, like just as a joke, we said like Toge, you know, like because like Toge in Indonesia is like, we have like a kind of like a slang, you know, like a joke for like either like, you know, like small and, you know, like kind of like, you know, nothing, whatever. So we kind of like use that name, and then it kind of stuck. So when we graduated, and then, you know, like when we did that Flash game thing, and then when we registered the company, and like, what should we call our company? Like, I don't know. Yeah, Toge is fine. Like, you know. And then yeah, so basically we didn't really think about it, so we registered it as Toge. And so after registering and all of that, we kind of like started thinking about the philosophy afterwards. So it's kind of like reversed, but so we kind of like, the philosophy is that, you know, like bean sprouts are small, and then you can plant that almost like anywhere. You can use, you know, like cottons or like, you know, or dirt, whatever, it can grow. So the idea is that we can grow and adapt quickly, and also like something that's small can, you know, a huge plant in the future. So the idea is like, you know, like big success can start from something that's small, and that's our philosophy. So that's Toge basically.
Cool.
I would have thought that because it's such a nice name. Toge is also something that's beloved here in Malaysia as well.
Yeah.
I especially like Toge, eating it in general. But it's great because the philosophy behind it, it's just so spot on. And you've grown 10 years. When do you guys actually reach 10 years, or have you passed that?
We've actually, well, like if we count 2009, then we're already like 11 years. I think we registered the company around January.
Okay.
To be honest, like we don't really remember like the exact date. So like we don't have like an exact date. Like, oh, this is the birthday of Toge. But we just celebrate it every January, basically.
The whole month of January is
like, okay, January
Toge month.
is like the birth of Toge, so yeah, okay.
Nice. So throughout this whole span of like 11 years, what's the biggest difference between the gaming scene in Indonesia today compared to back then?
Oh yeah, like the difference is huge. Basically, like when I was like starting back in like around 2008, 2009, there were probably only like 3 game companies in Indonesia, and a lot of the companies are very hush hush. You know, like they don't promote themselves. They don't really being covered in media. And probably like one thing is like a lot of Indonesians are very shy and they don't want to boast about their like achievements and stuff like that. So a lot of people don't know that Indonesia have game companies that even like the oldest one was Matahari Studios. It started around like in the late 90s, and I worked there for about like half a year before starting Toge. And a lot of like when we first starting up, we don't have we never imagined like one day we'll be making like console games or like releasing our games to the global market. And the only way to make your own games back then was like to make Flash games, right? So because it was like accessible, it's cheap, it's like you can use open source tools to make Flash games. So it's where a lot of Indonesian developers started from, and they started it as a hobby, right? They just like do it as a hobby, and then gradually we found out like, oh, making Flash game can make a decent living. So a lot of the studios that exist today actually started in that Flash game era. And back then we don't have like venture capitalists or like investors looking for game companies to invest, right? So the capital that I used was like my savings. Like it was like probably not even $500. Like we started very small. We only have like one computer each, and then we use our savings to basically to get kind of like sustain our development. And back then, like I remember like we have to eat like a lot of instant noodles because we want to save money before finishing our first game. Like in contrast, like today, like we have multi-million dollar game companies that has like a lot of investment from other venture capitalists, or like from like a lot of investors. And we're now making like console games. We get dev kits for Nintendo Switch, PlayStation, Xbox. So it's like it's a huge difference. But I think like starting a game company today, in my opinion, is a lot harder than starting back then during the Flash game era, because like I think Flash kind of provided like an ecosystem where people can iterate quickly. They can we can make a Flash game in like a week, and then have like $1,000 from sponsorships right after, right? Comparing it today, like you have to even like if you invest like like years of development for a mobile game or like for a PC game, especially for mobile games, right? It's you invest a lot and then you release it for free, and then you don't really see a direct return until you like do conversions, and stuff like that. So it's a lot harder, I think. But like you just have to adapt, and then learn new stuff as you go, and experiment, right? Iterate new games, ideas, and stuff like that to find your niche, probably.
Right. Okay. Cool. Speaking of niche, Toge is known for some incredible niche games like Coffee Talk and the recently released Necronator.
Yeah.
So tell us about how your team kind of came up with those games, and what were the inspirations behind these games?
Okay, yeah. So like in Toge, we kind of like do a game jam almost every year, basically to let people get their kind of like get overcome their burnout or after working on a project, and then just get new fresh ideas. And throughout those game jams, that's where Coffee Talk started. It started as a game jam, like an internal game jam, and we kind of let everybody in the company to explore ideas, even though you're not a programmer or you're not an artist. So Coffee Talk was the child of Fahmi, which is our back then he was like our marketing guy, marketing manager, and he doesn't really have like he never handled like game project in our company before. And so during that game jam, he kind of like, I have this idea, like I want to make a game where it kind of like replicates the feeling of like having a warm drink and then watching the rain and then listening to music. And yeah, basically he started from that, from that feeling, kind of like that experience. And then we let him, we let him explore that idea during that game jam, and then it resulted in a very simple prototype in just like 2 or 3 days. And then when we played that prototype, we feel like, oh, I think we could, there's something here. There's some potential. So we kind of like iterate on that idea, and then we put the demo on itch.io, and then we kind of like we see how people react to it, and then it turns out it was very positive. And so we decided to kind of like, okay, this is gonna be our project, and then it's now like it's released as Coffee Talk. For Necronator, it's kind of different because it actually started as we did a Necronator game during the Flash game era, which is like a web-based real-time strategy game, and we kind of like we want to bring it to the to the modern, like modernize it and then bring it to Steam. And so we started from what we already did back then, and then kind of like expand the idea and then try to mix it with new interesting concepts. And so we merged that with like deck building, roguelike deck building with card elements, and just we have like, I think we have like a clear direction for Necronator. So because we already know like what it's gonna be, and just like go straight ahead with that.
Actually, speaking of like how Necronator came about, I'm not sure if you can talk about this, but like, are there any other games from your Flash days that you'd want to sort of give the same treatment and bring back, modernize?
Yeah, actually we did 2 games already. The first one is Infectonator, which is like the zombie, like spreading virus chain reaction kind of game. And like to think about it, actually that game kind of like simulates how a virus spreads, right?
Yeah.
Because like when you play that game, you can really understand why social distancing is very important. And we basically did that back in 2010, and then we kind of like modernized it in 2016 or something like that, or maybe it's 2018 probably. So we released that the latest one, Infectonator 3, on Steam, and we're probably if the game makes sense, we will want to bring that, modernize it, but like we want to also explore new ideas, so we don't want to really get stuck with old ideas. So we will just like experiment and then brainstorm with the team and see like where the passion is, and we'll go with that.
Speaking of like new ideas, you've developed something called Steam Scout.
Yeah.
Can you tell us like how it works and why did you make it?
Yeah. So Steam Scout is kind of like I don't know, like I did that in like 2 days on my spare time, because I was like, as a publisher, we want to see like where, you know, like when you look at a certain game for example, for a benchmark, when you're thinking about developing your own game, so you kind of like, you want to see where, you know, like how did that game succeeded in the market, right? You want to see, like, for example, like where is the biggest audience comes from? Like, is it from America? Is it from China? Or is it from, you know, other parts of the world? So, and I thought, like, can we look at the Steam reviews and then basically break it down by the language? Then we could probably figure out, like, oh, you know, like this language was like the biggest, you know, like segmentation. So probably they get a lot of, you know, users from this region, for example, like that. And when I tried to look for that data, you couldn't really get it anywhere else. So I was like frustrated, like, man, how come nobody made this before? Like, so I just like wrote a simple JavaScript and PHP, and then basically kind of like pulled Steam API. Steam basically have like their own like web API, and then pulled that data and then break it down by language and then present that in a, you know, like contextual graph where people can really understand it. And like, yeah, so basically I just want to see, like, oh, like this game, you know, like how come you know, you get so many users or like something like that. So like, turns out like a lot of games that are successful, they have a lot of users from, you know, regions outside the English speaking regions. So like Chinese, you know, Chinese language is like one of the biggest, you know, like chunk of the market right now. Yeah. And surprisingly, like Korea is, even though the country is small, they are hardcore gamers, and they will buy any game, you know, like they buy and play games. So we see a lot of like users from Korea, and yeah, like even probably like regions like Brazil, for example. Like, people probably doesn't really, you know, like think about Brazil, but yeah, turns out that they have like a lot of users, and they play indie games. So I think I would recommend, you know, like you know, localizing your games to these, you know, these regions, and then you can also compare that to existing games that's probably similar to your game, so you can see like, oh, okay, where are the, you know, the users are coming from, and so you can kind of like, you know, like localize or like adapt your game and to make it fit with the market.
Nice. Like, does this mean that, considering how successful Steam Scout has been, does this mean that you have plans for the future of Steam Scout? Like, what do you plan on doing with it later on?
Yeah, so yeah, basically I'm not really a good, you know, web programmer, and yeah, I have like a lot of ideas to explore or like to expand that, you know, the tools, but yeah, no promises right now, so we'll wait and see, I guess.
All right, wait and see. Okay, so in your opinion, what games from Southeast Asia should gamers look out for?
Actually, there's a lot of new interesting games that's being developed right now. I think there's a game called Layak being developed from Jogja, and the team is probably like only 3 people. It looks very interesting. There's also Space for the Unbound, developed by Mujiken. And there's also another game called, I'm not sure, I think it's like Cendrawasih or something like that. And it has like Papua, you know, like Papuan influence, kind of like vibe to it. And then it's like a 3D third-person exploration game. It kind of feel like playing Uncharted.
Wow.
And it looks really cool. So that's something, you know, I think people would be you know, interested, and should be on your radar. But I'm not really sure like when you know these games are gonna come out. Yeah, for like from Toge Productions, we have, other than Space for the Unbound, we have Rising Hell, which is like a vertical roguelike platformer.
Yeah.
That's gonna be coming out very soon, hopefully early 2021. And then we have When the Past Was Around, which is like a point and click adventure game by Rena, Brigitta Rena, which is the creator of like a Raven Monologue. It's very interesting short game with a very like deep storytelling without any dialogue. So it's like all the story is being told by the the art and the visuals, and it's very interesting.
It's so interesting. Like throughout this whole sort of conversation, we've been listening to sort of like a wide variety of different genres of games, that both from Toge and then also ones that you recommend. So I'm kind of curious to know, growing up, what were your favorite games?
Yeah, I personally played like a lot of different games. Like I played like RPGs like Suikoden. I played Final Fantasy Tactics, but I also played like SimCity, Warcraft, Starcraft. I also played like Jagged Alliance. I played Metal Gear Solid. So like I kind of like played all these different games, but I never really finished like any of the games. So I probably like play like 50% of the game, and then move on to another game, and then play 50% of the game, and then move on to another game. Yeah, so like yeah, I like a lot of different things from different games, and like I think one of the key signatures in Toge is that we kind of like in a lot of our games is like we kind of merge different genres, and then try to present something that's kind of familiar but also new. Yeah, so I think that's because like I kind of like jump different genres very like very often.
That's actually quite interesting, considering like you said, like with Coffee Talk itself, that you hit niche markets by combining what's familiar and what's new. Like what, growing up, has there been a game that has accomplished that similar sort of like structure, where it was completely niche, and then one that you could even call like a guilty pleasure game that you kind of really enjoyed growing
up? I think like a lot of great games, they kind of like try to like combine different things, right? So like I don't really have anything on top of my head right now, but like I think like there's a lot of like video documentaries or like talks online, like from Ars Technica or like from GMTK. Basically like a lot of like JRPG. It started as like a Dungeons and Dragons, but they want to like streamline it and make it like accessible for the common folk to play like Dungeons and Dragons. So they kind of like invented that genre by kind of like mixing different different things that existed back then. And then like SimCity also started as like a strategy game, and then they removed the combat, and then just becomes SimCity. And then like, so I think like a lot of games they kind of like innovate by trying to figure out or like trying to mix it with different things, and sometimes you get something that like clicks and works. Sometimes you have to explore more and then do more experimentation on those games.
Right. So finally, what advice do you have for people who are just starting out in the world of video game development? What would you have told your younger self?
Yeah, I would definitely tell myself to like start like smaller, like don't be too ambitious, right? You kind of have to understand your limitations and capabilities, and then try to kind of like work on like with different people or like in different companies first, so that you have the knowledge and experience, and also the capital before you jump into like into the fray on your own, and then burn all of your money, and then like, because like when you first start making your first game, it's probably gonna fail. Like the chance like it failing is pretty high. So if you don't have enough capital to kind of like secure 2 games, you're probably gonna get screwed, right? So it's better to have like to kind of like save up some money, experience, and also like get connections with all different people, so that you can eventually someday you can collaborate, or you know like who to call when you kind of like need something. And yeah, I think also like start experimenting on small game ideas, do game jams, and if you find something that's interesting, like you can work on that on your spare time for a moment, and then until you kind of like you able to kind of like validate if that that idea is gonna take off or not. And then when you're like 100% sure, then you can like, okay, I'm gonna focus on that full time. Yeah, I think hopefully that makes sense.
Makes sense.
Definitely does.
It's actually really good advice. But before we sort of wrap things up, do you have anything you want to say to Toge fans out there who love your games? Say a few words maybe.
Well, I just want to say thank you for everybody who have played our games and have been supporting us throughout this year, the years. Hopefully, like we want to keep making awesome games that people can enjoy. And yeah, please like let us know like if you have any feedback or anything. You can come to our Discord channel or like Twitter or social media. Just reach out to us anytime. We're happy to hear your thoughts.
All right, sweet. Thank you so much, Kris, for making the time to talk with us today. Thanks, Dale, for hanging out with us today as well. And I'm thanking myself. We will see you guys again on the next episode of IGN House Call. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Bye.
See ya.